Welcome back to Deal Nation, where we tap into Launch Control's nationwide network to find out what's bringing in deals and how we can all work together to build generational wealth. We're joined today by Micah Nicholes, the owner and founder of UsLeadList. Micah, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. So a lot of, for our kind of pre-show conversation, a lot we can go over here. You guys are really a great source for people to find motivated leads, especially in the probate space. So looking forward to diving into that for sure. But let's start with your journey. How'd you get started in real estate investment?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, it started by just the lack. I'm one of 7 kids. I grew up in Idaho in the middle of nowhere. We were poor as dirt. And I had to basically, figure out how to get anything that I wanted that cost money because my parents were gracious. They worked hard, but if there was something shiny I wanted, it was on me because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that started young. I just, had to kind of figure out how to make that happen from the beginning. And so I've just naturally been an entrepreneur all my life. It started, my first job was, I would literally sell worms to bait farm, like a bait house in Idaho. I would like put probes in the earth. I don't know if anyone else did this, but so I would sell them, like, I can't remember. It was like $1 a pound for worms. That's a lot of worms. Anyway, fast forward a little bit. I went to the school of hard knocks, skipped college, worked in restaurants, did well there, had an early kids. I was like 22 when my first child was born, and had 3 of them. And, I had a job. It paid well. Restaurants were okay, but man, I was just, I had to fight really hard to get past that employee aspect. And so I just started, one business after another. I had a tree sawing business. I had a construction business. I like all these things that I did. And in 2015, in the midst of all that, I was underwriting like this a couple deals. One was a 4-plex, and it just looked like a good deal. It smelled like a good deal. It was a good deal, and it was $52,000 for a little 4-plex. It made, I think, $1,820 a month. And I was like, man, this is a no-brainer. Like, if I could just bolt this on to my income, like, that helps me out on the other side. And so I bought that deal, and then, a month later, I bought a 5-plex. It was, very similar numbers. And that was how I kind of like just transitioned out of my W-2, and like even because the way that I had learned to run a business, I was just making jobs for myself, right? And so I was just like making myself more busy, less time with my family, and I made maybe a little bit more money, but no, I wasn't breaking through.
And sorry to interrupt, but just quickly, you said 50-something thousand for a 4-plex. What market was that in?
I'm in Wisconsin, so this was like rural Wisconsin. But yeah, 52,000 for a 4-plex.
Man, rural Wisconsin is gorgeous. Like that.
Oh, dude, it's awesome here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice. Most people don't know that, so keep it a secret.
Absolutely beautiful. I know what spotted cow is. I know a couple things.
Absolutely, yeah. You've done around. Cool.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, continue.
Yeah, and so bought those properties, and I just was a landlord. I managed them myself. I took care of them myself, and for anyone who thinks that real estate from the get-go is passive, they're not managing their properties, or they're not managing them well enough, because it's a lot of work. And so, I remodeled basically all the units. I just put all the money back into it. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting on a big chunk of equity. And, there's a lot of stories along that way that, just managing tenants, doing all that work, it's a grind. And so now instead I underwrite all my deals to have management built in. So I'm not that guy, because I'm not that guy. I'm not good at it. I'm too flighty. Anyway, so fast forward a little bit more, during the pandemic, I'm still buying deals. I'm still doing deal like real estate, less holding, more flipping, and signing contracts and stuff like that. But during COVID, I was like, I kind of got my head up and I'm looking around at like what the government's doing. They're giving out all this money, and one of the places where they were giving out money was, uh, mergers and acquisitions for small businesses. And earlier you mentioned that I'm the founder. I'm actually not. I purchased this business,
Oh, okay.
4 years ago, and that all came from this money that the SBA was giving away. I can't remember. They'd cover 6 months of your loan to start, and they'd give you more money. They'd take off all the fees, yada yada. I don't know if they thought that space was going to be kind of the next black swan to, turn over the domino and everything would fall apart. And so I've vetted probably 100 companies while everyone was on lockdown. So I'm just like every day I'm in Zoom calls with with the owners of these companies I'm trying to buy. And finally I landed on this one. And it fit, one, because it's in the real estate space. I was already passionate about real estate. I'd already done a lot for my life. And then the second was the two gentlemen who were running the business. They were awesome guys, great dudes, but they had no tech savvy at all. They were basically running a digital business on paper. I'm like, okay, well, I can get in there. I can automate some of this stuff, remove workload, and increase efficiencies, and have a more like free lifestyle to enable me to keep on doing deals, keep on, being with my kids, like, all those things that are really important. And so that's what I did. I actually sold those two properties that I mentioned, uh, used all the equity from that, pushed it into this business, and we've been growing it ever since.
Amazing. So you were able to just basically use the profits that you were making from REI to do a small business acquisition. You didn't have to do it. Okay,
Yeah, that's exactly right.
that's great. Do you see much of a correlation between finding off market or distressed properties and finding potential businesses that you can build up? Like obviously you saw with this business, you saw a clear gap where you could improve profitability. But in terms of just sourcing those deals, do you see some similarities between the two markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, real estate's a great place to start to look at those underlying financial fundamentals. Business acquisition is kind of the next level. And that I went to acquisition university when I just started vetting all those companies, because you see so much. There's not every business is a great business to buy. There's a lot of people who are putting lipstick on the pig and saying this thing's amazing. And if I'm totally honest with myself, I probably got decently lucky. I could have got bought a lemon and not known until it was too late. But this was just a solid business, and it ran well, and they weren't misinterpreting anything, or kind of fudging the numbers or anything. But absolutely, it's a real estate underwriting is a great building block to start. And then, yeah, if anyone wants to buy a business, it's such a good tool to build wealth, because you know for me, real estate, I love real estate, but I want to hold my wealth in real estate. Like the business, it's a grind. You got to like push, move, all these things. And I'm still very passionate about that. But as my wealth grows, like now I'm like, I want really nice properties. I want stuff. I don't want to have to be in there managing tenants and doing all those things. And I want to hold my money there so I can make more money in my business and keep that chain kind of going. And
Yeah, I
I
mean, I think for, oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for a lot of our launch control subscribers, and just, and this story is just true of anybody that's really getting involved in real estate from the beginning. A progression that a lot of our subscribers go through is they start with wholesaling because they need the cash flow coming in,
Mhm.
and then they transition to holding properties because they want the equity and they want that growth over 10, 15, 20 years, right? And then as a kind of third tier, start looking into storage facilities, small business acquisition, with the idea of more steady cash flow coming in, right? Or a combination of
Absolutely.
potentially steady cash flow plus equity. So
And two, the other component is to offset taxes.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
doing cost segregation and using those really legal but unfair advantages to buying real estate. You can buy more real estate, the taxes you don't pay, and so that's super useful as well.
Yeah, I think I want to go back to a couple points in your kind of journey, but on that note, the taxation thing, this is kind of one of those elements to building a real estate investment business that you you don't really think about, I think, until it's time, right?
Hmm.
So for somebody coming in and prepping and they know there are tax advantages, like, where how did you get yourself educated about that? Was it trial and error? Did you have like a good CPA? Like what was your route there?
Yeah. So at first it was like I didn't know anything, and then it actually happened when I bought my business, and I'm just like, okay, we're making money, and I own real estate already. Like, is there any kind of maneuver that I can do to not pay as much? And so, yeah, I've gone through 4 CPAs in the last 5 years, and everyone was better than the last one. And the one that I'm working with now, there's just all sorts of tactics that you can work if you plan appropriately to not have to kind of pay the tax man. And so, yeah, finding the right CPA is super important. And then two, just knowing what to ask about. Like the 3 biggest things for me that changed my taxes right now that I'm doing in this year. First is cost segregation studies, and most people think about that for large multifamily properties. I did it for a short-term rental that I own and a 12-plex that I own as well. So they don't have to be these giant acquisitions. You can do it for a single family home. The next thing is the Augusta rule, which is you can rent your own home to your business, and you don't have to pay any taxes on that. And then the last one is I already mentioned I have kids. I have 4 kids, and so I actually pay my 4 kids a salary, $12,000 a
Yeah.
year, and I don't have to pay taxes on that legally. And
Yeah.
so, those 3 tactics can pretty much put someone into a net, equal. So they're not even paying taxes on all the profits they're making from the deals. So look into that if you haven't, or, reach out to me if you want some recommendations.
Oh, yeah, that's great advice. And for everyone listening, we'll have all of ways to contact Micah in the episode description below, so you'll be able to get in touch with him if you'd like. It's interesting in real estate investment. I feel like a lot of people, most people, and understandably, they're in a W-2. They want to get out of the W-2 situation. Like I said, aim for cash flow first. Start by wholesaling, and oftentimes don't really have the time or the financial freedom to look at what would be the final endpoint, right? Like at the final endpoint, you have a fully stood up company. You're taking advantage of these specific tax loopholes or tax advantages. You're using these marketing channels. You're using this kind of CRM setup, and like looking at what a very top tier REI professional, what their operation looks like, and being able to create a smaller scale model of that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I can't spend the money to do all of that, but what can I do that covers the basics of operations, sales and marketing funnel, taxation issues, and just networking within REI buyers, other investors, etc. Like, how can you shrink that down? If I think if more people had the luxury of time and money to be able to really kind of do that preset research, it'd be an easier entry point for REI.
Absolutely. Because most people are just like, it's just kind of like panic mode. It's like I need to get out of this pain of this W-2, my job, my reality that I'm living, and I can't do this groundhog routine anymore, and I've got to transition. And so you're just like fighting your way upstream until you get there, and then you're like, oh, I could have done this along the way. I could have had that. And so just implementing these little things will actually help you move faster to that end goal. But you have to know where you're going first too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, on that note, right, like the kind of the panic mode, getting out of W-2, your path was you started with holding properties, right? That you had a fourplex, fiveplex, you were bringing in the rent.
Hmm.
Most people that work with launch control start with wholesaling and then transition to that. And everybody hears it's not as passive as you think. But I'm curious from your experience, what does that mean? Because when you're working a W-2, lack of freedom of time means that you're locked in from nine to
Hmm.
five, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Whereas putting in a lot of work, if you're owning properties, it might mean, I imagine it might mean a Monday that goes till 8 o'clock at night, but you can take Tuesday off to hang out with your kids if you want to. But maybe I'm wrong about that. So when you say that it can be a lot of work, like how does that usually play out in your experience in a non-managed situation?
Yeah, I mean, so at that time, I was still working full time in restaurants, but restaurant schedules, it's the evenings, right? And
Hmm.
so what a lot of work meant for me was like I was trading time with my family to go do more work. And you know how Warren Buffett, all those big moguls, they always talk about that first 100,000 is the hardest,
Hmm.
and that's what it is because you have to choose. You have to give up something that's good that you want and sacrifice it for something later. And to if you don't have $100,000, if you don't have kind of piggy bank money to play around with, you have to create it. And what does that mean? Like you literally have to starve yourself from things you want now so you can do more in the future. And so, I mean, that phase lasted a long time in my life. And there's a real tangibility of like not having, sacrificing, going to my kids' soccer games, going, like being there for the dance recitals because I was working really hard to build up something that, they'll probably get in the future. And so, yeah, I think it's just being aware of that tension and knowing you're going to have to make some tough choices.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's transition to US lead list, like what it was, what it is, what it's gonna be. Give
Yeah,
us give us the breakdown.
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, what we're experts at, like, and I say this humbly, like I see all of our competitors' data, people feed it to us. I say this humbly, but what I think we are the best at in this space, in the real estate space, is aligning real estate ownership and death. And so we affectionately call that the inheritance list. And most people, when they hear that, they kind of go, "Oh, probate," and that's true, but it's not true because we're basing it on the death, and so most of the time it's pre-probate. It's before probate's even happened. Um, but there's a few other segments of that list that don't ever go to probate. So I'll kind of rattle them off here: surviving spouses, trusts, and then interfamily transfers before the death. And so we're actively searching for all four of those things, and that's what you get when you work with our data. And and so that's what our current product is. We do a bunch of append stuff. We skip trace. We look to see if there's tax delinquency, vacancy, and then we actually even build out another secondary list that we give to our customers. And it's funny actually, the old owners of the company, they called this the insiders list. They never sold it. They kept it to themselves. And part of it was like they got this deal. I think they bought over 100 houses in just out. It was in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Bought 100 houses for $5,000 each. Um, and I mean, now, like, and even then they were probably worth 50, 60,000. And so it was just this stupid deal, but they got to do it in one transaction. And uh, basically what that secondary list is does, if someone passes away, are they a real estate investor or, owner as well? And so we do a secondary search looking to see, hey, are they a portfolio owner? Do they have one property? Is it a vacation home? Do they have 30 properties? And, they live on the cash flow of that. And, it becomes really interesting when you're talking to people, especially landlords or if the landlord passed away and someone else all of a sudden has to manage those properties and take care of all that. And it introduces a really substantial pain point because that other person, probably didn't train their spouse or significant other or whoever was taking over the estate to run said portfolio. And they're like, no, I just want it gone. Just get it off my plate. I'll work with you.
One of the things that we really advise people to do at Launch Control, regardless of list, is to speak to an individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So don't send a text message to Phoenix. That's send a text message to an individual in a housing development in an area of Phoenix. So you know specifically who you're talking to. You'll have some idea of pre-motivation before you get onto a discovery call and really figure out what their timeline is, what the complete profile of motivation is, all of that, right?
Yeah.
And so what you guys provide gives a lot of insight into what that individual conversation should be. So if it's an interfamily transfer, and then you do that secondary search and you find out that the person that it's transferred to owns a portfolio, well, now you're talking to an investor, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody who understands real estate, and it's going to shift your conversation as opposed to somebody that lives in Wisconsin and inherited a house in Florida from an aunt that they never spoke to. Right?
Right.
That's a very different conversation. So, what? Well, one, kind of what advice or education do you give to clients that are using US Lead List, and then what kind of advice would you give people about scripting and how to approach these kind of unique funnels that you're able to set up for people?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like scripts. I think scripts suck. They're useful to train people, but if you give someone a script, they can't carry that script to the same completion that you would without having the same mindset behind it.
Yeah.
And so many people get lost here because they go in to trying to buy a property, and it's all about price. It's all about the things that you can actually measure. And you and I have been in this business long enough to recognize that, like, people do things for reasons that we can't measure. And like, so it's figuring out what those things are and how to expose them in a conversation in a way that you are actually coming in, you're helping. And then once you figure out how you can help, the price usually takes care of itself. And so that's what when almost everyone, as soon as they get on a call with me, when I'm kind of onboarding them with our product, they're just like, well, how does the conversation go? How do I talk to these people who passed away? And for me, like, what I recommend and what I do in my own business is you treat them like anyone else. Don't make them special. Don't make price the first thing out of your mouth. Connect with them as a human. Like, the biggest tension power thing that you can deliver to your sellers, the biggest thing that you have is your personality, what you're able to give to them, and the problems that you can solve. And you can't solve any problems if you go straight to price. Well, I'm sorry, that sometimes that is just the solution, and deals happen like that, but it's rare. The best deals are created because they trust me, they feel my concern, they know that I care, and I just want to help. And so I don't bring up death, I don't talk about it. As soon as they bring it up, I'm like, you can't help but be empathetic of their situation. Like, they've literally just lost something that is irreplaceable, they're never going to get it back, and all of us are going to that same place. And so it hurts, there's pain, and responding to that in kind, it's like, that's what's appropriate. And so I kind of circled around a little bit, but
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I also think that scripting is a slippery slope, right? Because
yeah.
it really comes down to how well you listen, not
Mhm.
what you say, right? And
Exactly.
and the saying, it applies to text as well, because texting is really the entry point of the conversation, right? Like, you want, when you get onto the phone with someone, you want them to feel like they're talking to the person that they were just exchanging text messages with, right? So it shouldn't feel like a separate conversation, it should feel like a continuation up. And so a lot of times people will come into launch control and they'll want to know what the golden message is, right? Like what should I say? What's the golden message?
Right.
And there is no golden message, right? The question is really like, who are you speaking to, right? So if they're using a UsLeadList section of names and they're speaking to individuals where it said like, was it interfamily transfer? Well, interfamily transfer in what area of the country? Interfamily transfer at what age? What age is the recipient of the person who received the house? Where what profile information do you have? Demographic information do you have that can tell you going in how to approach tone, how to approach what you say, how the entry point of that conversation, so that you can tee up an opportunity to then listen,
Yeah.
right? And if you listen, and like you said, like once you've built that rapport, oftentimes price is a lot more flexible than it is if you come in and throw out a number that is going to probably feel insulting if you
Right.
haven't built up that rapport already, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the tension in selling, right? It's like, what are you going to do for me? Like that's what they care about first. It's like, and if it's only price, then it's just a bidding auction. But if you can work emotions, if you can help them, if you can, whatever, even just listen to them. Like, so many of these people on this list, they're older, and so it's like I just find myself hearing about like really interesting lives, which for the most people, they'd probably get off the phone as soon as they can. But like I like conversations. I like learning something from someone
Yeah.
older than me who can show me a better way. And so I sit and listen to these folks, and I've heard and learned some really amazing things.
So here's something that I've never understood from a marketing perspective about the real estate investment industry. Everybody I know is sitting on these great stories of homeowners that they've helped,
Hmm.
stories that they've heard, solutions they've provided, resolutions that were positive for both seller and investor. But I never hear testimonials, right? The only testimonials I ever hear are, I made seven figures last year. Here's how I did it, right? Or it's
Hmm.
investors speaking to investors. So why aren't there more experience related testimonials of how we help homeowners?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, that part, it's just not as sexy. It's easy to put dollar signs out there than it is to, you know, properly convey what you actually did for people. And there's bad operators in that space, and there's good ones who are basing their transactions on how they can help, what they can actually do for that end person. But it is funny. I think there needs to be a shift because real estate investors are they're solving tangible problems that these people don't know how to solve themselves, and that
Yeah.
is a net benefit. And more often you end up hearing about, oh, this person screamed at me, but then later that day I got a deal, and it made it worth it. It's like, people are going to scream at you no matter what. Does if you're not getting screamed at, you're not marketing hard enough, because there's always someone who's willing to complain.
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, absolutely. I agree. There needs to be some central hub where people just get to share how they helped.
Yeah, because if I'm a seller, right, and I'm getting contact, I've gotten 3 direct mail pieces, and I've gotten 5 text messages, and I've gotten a couple of cold calls, and everybody's asking about a property that I own. My first question, and this happens a lot, like everybody knows that it's getting past the trust barrier, right? Like, is
Hmm.
this real? Can I trust this as an opportunity? And if I can stand out by saying, well, look, don't take my word for it. Here's some experience related testimonials, or some experience related interviews, or whatever, however you want to frame it, that to show from other homeowners, right? And those materials are most likely going to be people saying, look, I was in a bad spot. It wasn't the ideal solution, but it was a good solution. And I trusted Micah, and he made me feel at ease. He walked me through all of my potential options. I took the one that I thought was best for me at the time. That's all people want to hear, right? They
Yep.
want to hear that they weren't taken advantage of. And so I feel like that's a gap in the market of people not focusing too much on the success factors of gaining money in real estate investment, and not enough on the success factors of working with sellers and providing solutions in like a visible kind of way.
Yeah, you're right. That's the next business someone's going to fill that gap and should.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Um, so with when what's the process like for someone, one of our investors wants to come on and work with you guys? What's the process of getting started like?
I mean, it's relatively simple. The first kind of thing we have to look is like, earlier I mentioned like I really believe that we have the best product around, death and this real estate matching. And to protect our investors who are paying for our service, we only sell each county 3 times. And so we have a running list of counties that are just unavailable. Like I won't sell you. And
Yeah.
so it's to see if your area is open, and then if it is, we basically just kind of get you, the counts of your areas, explain the costs, and set up what we call, it's just an open-ended subscription where, we every 5th of the month we charge cards and send out data via email, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. I do have a question I wanted to ask related to probate, because I know that for pre-probate, kind of the funnels that we've been discussing, right?
Yep.
I think one of the hesitation points for people coming in, aside from what am I listening for? How do I approach these conversations? Is, are there any other kind of legal complications or legal things that I should flag going into a probate deal that may not exist in just kind of like a standard wholesale transaction?
I mean, certainly, yeah. I mean, pre-probate and probate especially, it can get messy, and it can be tricky, and also they can just take a long time. And so it's like I had this deal in my funnel for a year and a half. This guy, I think I sent him a letter, responded to me, and I just kept on following up. A year and a half. And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna sell eventually. I just am waiting on this and that and this and that." And finally, one day he called me and he's like, "I'm ready to sell. You want to meet me over the property?" I was like, "I'll be there right now." So time frame is one. Death, and there's 2 main components that make it take a little bit longer. The first is emotions, and the second is logistics. Normally this is, and you're combining those 2 things at the same exact time, right? And so you have to go through a bunch of, paperwork, deal with lawyers, and all the while you're grieving. And so it takes a little bit of time. And people, at the beginning, when we're generating our data, on average, when we release it on the 5th, we're about 6 weeks behind the death. As far as death goes, like that's really soon. That's sudden. Like people are still kind of wrapping their head around this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's having good follow-up in your funnels, staying in front of these people for a longer period of time. But then when you're dealing with it on the probate side, yeah, you might have to work with lawyers. There's going to be legalities that you're going to have to look into. And then to further make this more complex is that every state, every county has their own specific laws around probate. And so you need to know your probate laws ahead of this. Like you don't have to be a lawyer, but you just need to go and do a little bit of research on that. And how I recommend our clients do that is looking at nolopress.com. Just type in your state or county and nolopress and probate, put all those things together, and it'll give you a summary of what to expect, what to look like, what it's going to look like. And then 2, there's often in states there's shortcuts for probates where it could still be in probate, but you can buy that property out of probate right away. Just all you have to do is submit a document and you can purchase it out of the estate. And so just know the law so you can work within the system.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. And then what's interesting is that my assumption would have been that probate deals turn over pretty quickly, but it sounds like nurturing is really important when it comes to
Absolutely, yeah,
closing these
really
out.
important.
So,
And
we have, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, don't get me wrong. There's last month we did a deal with this guy, and he was actually a surviving spouse. His wife passed. He was in pre foreclosure as well, and he was just going to give it up. And we I think had the appointment and closed within a week, pretty much. So like he was ready to go right then and there, but that one was surviving spouse, so it didn't have to go to probate. He was already on title. He just had to produce a death certificate of his wife, so she could be removed, and then we could close. And so it varies with this list because not everything is going to go through probate on it. Some of it will, but not all of it.
Right. For I'm sure you had this happen where in the beginning, where you did your research, you knew what to look into for state by state, got midpoint through closing a deal and hit some kind of complications or things that you needed to get educated on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
How did you deal with that?
I called a lawyer. I had this deal. I like just going back to stories around deals. I had this kid. He responded to my letter. I walked into this. It was a condo. It was probably worth, I don't know, 200,000. And after walking through it, I'm like, "How much do you think this is worth?" And he looks me square in the eyes and he says, 25,000. I'm like, 25,000. Like I literally said this to him. I'm like, I can't steal this property from you for 25,000. That's like not okay. Um, and so we worked out a price where I actually felt okay. Um, but the problem was like this guy, he had no money. He they were late on their payments as well. Like there was this was just a hairy deal. It was a mess. And so I ended up having to call not one but like five attorneys before I could get like a solution for this kid so I could close on the transaction and make it happen. And then once that happened, I like clicked. I was like, well, if I'm in a desperate place reaching out to this guy, this lawyer, and he's helping me, kind of go through this process, I was like, I should have like three or four of them on the Rolodex that like, I can bring them business, but then they can also recommend their, people who are trying to sell just properties as is, my service to them. And so that's what I did. I kind of just, networked with, probate attorneys in the area and found them and just said, hey, like this is a channel of marketing I'm doing. I know I'm going to get stuff that needs to be probated. If I bring you the business, would you consider referring me back? And that's been really cool because there's not many better recommendations than a lawyer saying, hey, you should work with Micah. He could buy this property from you. So I'll take those any day.
No, I love that. One of the things that we suggest for all of our subscribers to do is to really use launch control as a kind of 360-degree tool for their business. And
Mm-hmm.
so as a for instance, in just standard REI in a non-probate situation, or and even in a probate situation, I suppose, but just in running an REI business,
Yep.
is use launch control even before you go into a new market or before you start reaching out to sellers. Contact all your buyers
Yeah.
and use launch control to reach out to the buyers. Find out what those buyers are looking for, so that you can then turn around and find exactly the properties that they're looking for and have quick turnover. Use launch control to contact all of the realtors in your area and let them know that you can feed them properties that don't fit your margins. And then if they've got anything that is looking like it's going to hit hit what, I'm blanking on the name of the list, but when the property doesn't sell on MLS
Yeah.
over expired listing,
Expired.
like
Yeah.
yes, it looks like it's about to be an expired listing. Like there should be no expired listings. Like real estate agents should be able to turn those over to wholesalers or investors and get those properties taken care of before that anything ever hits that list, right? But if you can set up those relationships just by a simple text, so that
Mhm.
realtors are sending properties to you, buyers are telling you exactly what they're looking for, and lawyers are feeding you properties within that probate system. So you're setting up these back end pipelines through launch that allow you to have properties coming to you instead of you having to hustle, hustle, hustle. It's a step ahead of almost everyone using the system if you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and hack for people who actually want to do that. Focus on the lawyers that are actually like they're already spending marketing dollars to grow their business. So like the ones that say sponsored on there that are, you know, are paying for Google Ads, call them first because they're already spending money to grow their business.
That's a great piece of advice, and I think that it's a way to speed up the process for anybody looking to do that.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
did want to touch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, so I use launch control in a specific way for reaching out to these leads because the problem with pre-probate is that you don't always know who the executor is, right? And so, you know, there's been no one elected yet. And so I use it for a segment of our list, and I combine it with direct mail. And so I reach out to all the spouses on our list and hit them with texts, just saying like, "Hey, I'm, whatever." I have a variety of messages, but um, that is the segment that has worked really well for me to kind of source deals on this list. Like, unfortunately, you know, what makes this a good list is that there's someone who who passed away and you can't talk to them, and until it does go to probate, you don't know that right person to talk to. And so how I work around that is I send direct mail to everyone, but then I also text the spouses.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's a clever way in. What kind of results do you get from that? Like, what are you looking for?
When you say results like response
Like, what
rates,
kind of
or
responses are you getting? Like, how does the conversation progress from that initial point?
I mean, really, I just leave it. I treat them, I use other data other than, probate, an inheritance list for marketing,
Yeah,
but I treat them all the same. Like I want, I basically just work to insert a sliver of my personality into everything that I'm doing. I don't like out of the can, messages, responses, anything. And I
yeah,
want to appear like I'm a human. I'm a unique individual. And so I pepper that in anywhere I can in my messaging, especially on the initial outreach. But other than that, I mean, my results are like, you know, as far as responses go, they're high. They're well over 10%. And yeah, and then basically, I just work to get them on the phone as soon as I can. If
yeah.
there's a positive result on the text channel, then I call them. I don't ask for I don't ask if I can. I just get them. I call them and say, "Hey, this is Micah," and go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, I mean, we always want to get people on the phone as quickly as possible. That your personality is going to come through, your listening skills are going to come through
Hmm.
via a phone call. But given that a lot of these leads need to be nurtured, the drip automation feature and launch control can be really vital to closing these. And
Yeah,
it's a place where scripting is a problem, right?
yeah,
Because what a lot of people want to do with a lot of investors want to do with the drip automation is just copy paste some simple scripting, just to stay a little bit present. Whereas actually the best practice there is to create a string of messages that essentially dissect what you would say on a phone call, right? Like
yeah,
to get to the point of getting them to know that you're someone who wants to listen, someone that can provide value, going into like we were talking about testimonials, showing that you've worked with people and that that you are a trustworthy source that can provide results vetted by other homeowners in similar situations. So there's if when used to it their full advantage, the drip automation can be really powerful with these types of leads.
yeah. It's funny. Like, well, this is true with any business, right? It's like, you know, everything comes in from the top. You're spending money on marketing, And it ultimately leads down into a smaller and smaller funnel. But all along the way, there's like these little leaks. And what you were just talking about is a leak of mine that I need to optimize better. But doing that has enormous consequences all the way down to the bottom, which is when you finally get paid. And setting all that up properly is huge.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying. Like, if you can take the time to look at what, like, almost an ideal setup from a big shop is, and really, really shrink that down to whatever the size of your current investment business is, it's
Hmm.
worth doing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's. I was talking to Stephanie Betters at Left Main earlier this week on Deal Nation,
Yeah.
and she was talking about being early stage in her career and having 100 motivated leads that had come in, and closing what she considered a small percentage of those, and said, like, well, what about the others? Right? They've shown signs of motivation. Why didn't they close? Right?
Yeah.
And every single investor out there has their stat that is equal to that, right? Or there's this big bucket of motivated leads that came in and didn't close, and the question is why, right? And a lot of times it can come down to not having just automations, but the right automations and the right amount of value seeded into those automations, so that you are getting net results 4 weeks, 4 months, a year and a half later, whatever the timeline for the seller may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, I think it's just that follow up, right? How good is your follow up? Because we're all busy. We're humans, right? We get distracted. We're having fun. We're not working. We're not trying to solve a problem until we are. And
Yeah.
then you want them to be like, oh, Michael's the guy. I'm gonna finally call him. He's reached out to me 45 times. Today's the day. That flip switches
Yeah.
and they're ready to go.
Yeah, because you're trying to do deals, plural. They are trying to do a
Right.
deal that makes sense for them. And so to them, that deal is the only thing that matters. It's the most important thing. And they want to choose the timing. Fair enough, right? So you want to be top of mind and having had already provided value. So that when they come to you, you're just a no-brainer solution for them.
Totally. I couldn't agree more.
All right. So for everyone listening in, or anyone watching this, you can see UsLeadList here on the bottom of the screen. Get in touch with Micah and his team. If you're just listening in, we'll put all of Micah's contact information in the episode description below. Uh, Micah, any last little things you wanted to mention or promote before we wrap things up?
No, I don't want to promote anything. I just want to speak to the people who are like having to make those little tiny daily sacrifices for a brighter future. And just tell them to just keep your eye on the prize. It does pay off, but it does not make the pain any less real. And so keep on hustling, keep on grinding. The dream's out there. You just got to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And last thing I'll say for everyone, if you're a launch control user and you want to use UsLeadList, if you're using UsLeadList and you want to use launch control, make sure that when you get signed up, that you let our teams know that you're working with both systems, so that we can work together to optimize things for you and help you bring in a lot more deals.
Sweet.
All right. Well, thanks, Micah. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's super fun.